It is interesting that so many prophesying practices date back centuries and centuries. Is this because we felt so lost and confused then that we more desperately needed to know the answers? Or is it because we were less skeptical and more readily sought answers because we believed they were available? In any case, palmistry is no exception. The art of reading palms dates back to Babylonia, ancient Greece, China, and India, among other places, until it was heavily suppressed by the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. The Church ranked it as one of the 7 forbidden arts, putting it right up there with necromancy and fire magic. Compared to these two, simple palm reading seems fairly harmless. But the Church's efforts to suppress palmistry were very successful until the mid-1800s, when people started taking the practice seriously again. It became regulated by the Chirological Society of Great Britain, so that certain lines on a palm would always be interpreted the same way, no matter who was doing the reading. But, like tarot and astrology, palmistry tells more about the personality of the bearer of the palm and less about their future, though there is a little of that sprinkled in. There's reason to believe that there is something behind palmistry. The practice of fingerprinting, for instance, reminds us that no two hands are exactly alike, and while the eyes may be the windows to the soul, the hands are a lot easier to read. We do everything with our hands, and they bear the evidence of that. The callus from where you hold your pen, the way you bite your nails, the swelling around a wedding ring, or the tan line from where one used to be, the scars, the burns, everything. The evidence of our lives is in our hands. We have them to thank for our place outside of the food chain. It's no wonder that palmistry has hung on for so long, despite the efforts to suppress it. There are 2 branches of palmistry. Chiromancy, which deals with the lines on the palm, is what usually comes to mind when we think about palm reading. But there is also chironogmy, which looks at the shape and texture of the hands, including the fingers and thumbs. Each hand will tell a reader something different. The non-dominant hand represents the person's inherited traits. So, for instance, my dominant hand is my right hand, so my non-dominant hand would be my left hand. So that would show my inherited traits that they were born with and how they came into the world. The dominant hand shows how life has changed that person. So again, for instance, that would be my right hand. My dominant hand, my right hand, would show how life has changed me. And then you watch for the differences between the 2 thumbs. Chiromancy. There are 3 major lines: the lifeline, the heart line, and the head line, and several minor lines, as well as a number of mounts and markings to read with chiromancy. If you listen to the various descriptions I'm about to state, and then look at your pawn, you will find that several of them may apply. For example, your lifeline might be short, forked, and shallow. The art of palmistry is not just in being able to see the lines clearly, but also in how you interpret the information you are given, so that you can tell someone with a short, forked, and shallow lifeline that they are better at overcoming challenges than they think they are, and that they will need to harness that ability soon, as their life is about to change. Remember, too, that the lines will be different on each hand, and you should take both hands into account, though the non-dominant hand will generally reveal more. Let's talk about the major lines. The lifeline. This line tells you a great deal about your life, but it doesn't tell you when you're going to die or anything like that. Instead, the lifeline describes the kind of life you will have and are having, your relationships, your health, and your very existence. If you have a long lifeline, that indicates a healthy and well-balanced person. A short lifeline, that communicates that the person is good at overcoming challenges. It does not mean a short life. Faint is low energy, perhaps unwilling to take chances, and a deep lifeline is a smooth and easy life. A broken lifeline with a break in it signifies that there has been a major disruption, like an illness or an accident. If the break occurs in both hands, it means that the disruption was more severe. The closer to the wrist the break is, the younger the person was when the disruption occurred. A forked lifeline marks a change in lifestyle. Chained or crisscrossing lines point to a troubled path. Multiple lifelines, if the person has more than one lifeline moving along essentially the same path, that can mean that they have a true soul partner, like a twin friend, or life partner. The heart line, also known as the love line or the mensal line. This gives hints to the person's emotional state as well as their relationships with others. If it's long, this would suggest the person is balanced and open, but perhaps a little starry-eyed. Overextended, if the line reaches all the way across the palm, it indicates that the person might have codependent tendencies. Short means self-centered. Deep, stressed by relationships. Faint, doesn't place much importance on emotions or relationships. Straight, somewhat passive in relationships. Curved, emotional and intuitive. Wavy, may have trouble with commitment. Broken, the person may have experienced or will experience an emotional trauma. Forked, practical, good at maintaining balance. Chained, easily hurt, may suffer from depression. Branches going up, this person has strong relationships. Branches going down, this person suffers from heartbreak on occasion. The headline. The line of wisdom goes deeper than just learning. It also reveals information about that person's psychological makeup, as well as their intuitive abilities. If it starts from the same point as the lifeline, such a shape indicates a strong will. A long one. A long line suggests intelligence, a good memory, and a willingness to think things through. Overextended. If the line extends across the entire palm, the person is likely highly successful and brave, though possibly also somewhat selfish. Short. Practical, no nonsense. Straight. Realistic, good attention to detail, not much imagination. Curved. Idealistic, intuitive, and imaginative. Wavy points to inner conflict between the person's thoughts and actions. May be untrustworthy. Deep, sensible with an excellent memory. Faint, daydreams, has trouble concentrating. And if it's broken, signifies inconsistency and perhaps mental exhaustion. If it's forked, called a writer's fork or a lawyer's fork, this person enjoys debate, has an excellent imagination, and communicates clearly. Branches going up, professional success. Branches going down, struggle, disappointment, or depression at some point in person's life. The minor lines. Not all of these lines will be present on every hand, but if they are, they indicate something more specific about the person. They're not all the minor lines, but this list covers the most common ones. The sun line, also known as the Apollo line, indicates that the person is creative, successful, and self-confident. Bracelet lines, also known as rascette lines, they indicate longevity. The more of these lines someone has, and the clearer those lines are, the longer and healthier that person's life will be. The fate line, also known as the line of destiny, it indicates the person's life path. This refers to events that the person has no control over, obstacles that must be faced. Girdle of Venus. This line indicates a very emotional person, one who experiences both extreme highs and extreme lows. The line of health. This line may say something about the person's health, but its presence more likely speaks to the skills as a healer, either emotionally or physically. Intuition line. This person is highly sensitive and may even possess psychic abilities, but has difficulty in crowds, such as an empath. The mounts. Mounts are bumps of flesh on the palms. They may be more or less pronounced on your hand. The Mount of Venus. This bump relates to love and passions. If it's present but not usually pronounced, this person is healthy, has positive relationships, and appreciates the beauty in the world. If it is elevated, the person is self-indulgent. If it is flat, the person does not have a strong connection to their family. The Mount of Jupiter. This mount relates to the ego, to how we want to be perceived, and to success. If it is present but not usually pronounced, the person is compassionate, generous, and has a positive outlook. If it is elevated, the person is self-centered and likes to be in control of others. If it is flat, the person is lacking in self-confidence. The Mount of Saturn. This shape refers to patience, duty, and responsibility. If it is present but not usually pronounced, the person is friendly, independent, and takes their responsibilities seriously. If it is elevated, the person may be depressed or isolated from others. If it is flat, the person might be disorganized and not very self-aware. And then the Mount of Apollo, also known as the Mount of the Sun. This bump relates to self-assurance. If it is present but not usually pronounced, the person is outgoing and flexible. If it is elevated, the person might have a jealous nature. If it is flat, the person might be shy and indecisive. Then the Mount of Mercury. This elevation points to success and also to the ability to read people. If it is present but not usually pronounced, the person is successful in business and an excellent communicator. If it is elevated, the person may be a bit greedy. If it is flat, the person might have trouble reading social cues and may be unambitious. And then finally, the Mount of Luna, also known as the Mount of the Moon. It relates to intuition, imagination, and creativity. If it is present, but not usually pronounced, the person is artistic and thrives when immersed in nature, particularly by the sea. If it is elevated, the person might dwell overlong on fantasies. If it is flat, the person might be imaginative, but prefers to be quiet in private. Markings. Of course, we all have other marks all over our hands, sometimes on the lines themselves. These add a deeper layer of meaning to the lines. As a way of interpreting them more specifically, standalone markings have meanings as well. Breaks. Most lines have breaks in them. They don't necessarily signify anything negative. They simply mark a life lived, an interruption in the flow of energy, which happens to all of us. Chains. Chains in a line can indicate obstacles. So if there are any chains early in a lifeline, that can mean a difficult childhood. Crosses. This suggests stress. Crosses are more pronounced than grills. This is more along the line of a cross to bear. A phrase. When a line ends in a phrase, that indicates confusion. The lifeline often ends in this way. Grills, they can indicate stress. Islands. An island represents an interruption that is more significant than a break. It is generally a difficult time. A trident or a triangle, these markings are considered signs of good luck. Chironomy. Chironomy looks at the shape of the hands, grouping them into 4 distinct categories based on the 4 elements. It also looks at the individual fingers, the thumbs, the fingernails, the size of the hands, and their texture. You'll note that chironomy is pretty black and white in its interpretations, and that having short fingers is pretty much always a bad thing. Chironomy is also somewhat useful, and so it often just incorporated into a general palmistry practice to enhance the reading of the lines. The hand shape. The fire hand. Short fingers and a relatively long palm. This person is extroverted and outgoing and also fairly emotional. The earth hand. This is short fingers and a square palm. They are practical and hardworking and somewhat resistant to change. Prefers a life spent outdoors. The air hand. They have long fingers and a square palm. Logical, intelligent, good communicator, but easily bored. The water hand. Long fingers, long palm, sensitive and creative, driven by their emotions, may not handle stress well. Okay, the hand size. If you have a large hand, proportionally larger hands indicate that the person is capable, hardworking, and sociable. A smaller hand indicates that the person can be a little egotistical and quite ambitious. Just an average size hand. Those who fall in between have a lot of common sense and show good judgment. Okay, the hand texture. Thick means stubborn and somewhat insensitive. Thin is sensitive, hence thin-skinned. Rough is hardworking, practical, somewhat impatient. Soft is artistic and refined. The fingers. Note that the length of each finger should be measured in relation to the others, rather than based on actual length. For example, someone with a small hand but relatively long index finger would be more confident and capable than someone with a larger hand, and therefore a larger index finger, but whose index finger is shorter in relation to their other fingers. The index finger, also known as the Jupiter finger. Long indicates that the person is confident and capable, and short signifies shy and lacking in self-confidence. The middle finger, also known as the Saturn finger. Long suggests that the person is hardworking and detail-oriented. Short communicates that the person isn't particularly ambitious, but is willing to take risks. The ring finger, also known as the Apollo finger. Long reveals that the person is creative and artistic. Short tells us that the person might lack enthusiasm. The pinky finger, also known as the Mercury finger. Long indicates that the person is highly intelligent and a good communicator. Short implies that the person might be immature. And then the thumb. A large thumb generally signifies that the person is a leader, while a small thumb means that the person is more of a follower. A hitchhiker's thumb, a thumb that can bend over backwards, means that the person is easygoing, while a rigid thumb means that the person is rigid. Then the fingertips. If you have cone-shaped fingertips, you're flexible and willing to compromise. Pointed is sensitive and artistic. Spatulate, which means flat flaring outwards, sort of like a spatula. Creative, inventive, pioneering. And then square, methodical and rational. And then lastly, the fingernails. Thin and curved mean gentle and kind. Broad means strong personality, might have a temper. Fan-shaped means stressed. How to do a reading. Start with the person's non-dominant hand, as this will provide a baseline for you to read the differences in the dominant hand. Take your time. There's a lot to absorb. Take notes if you want or need, and then follow the charts that I have also provided in the course. Next, look at the person's dominant hand. For now, don't worry about comparing the two. Just see what the dominant hand tells you. Again, take notes if you need to. Finally, look at the differences between the two. If lines are clearer on one hand than the other, what does that say to you? If some markings are present on one hand but not the other, what does that imply? For instance, if the fate line is present on the non-dominant hand but is missing on the dominant hand, perhaps that person has, for better or worse, stepped aside from their destiny. Don't forget to look at the shapes of the hands to see what chironogamy adds to your information. When you feel confident that you have learned all that you can, share your understanding with the person whose hands you have been studying. Walk them through the process and see how much of it rings true.